smell the coffee and taste it. Doing quite well. All right, so this little episode of Wake Up and Smell the Coffee with Doc Scott's going to be chapter 3 from The Dream Giver. Um, I'm going to basically read the chapter to you guys. It's from the book called The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkerson. And it's been part of a topic that we've been talking about in our Hammer School of the Prophets, which is about dreams and how to awaken to the dream and what that looks like. And so the parable gives good language to the process that we go through with the as a dreamer. And so I'm sure we'll be on again with Zach Preston for more commentary on one of these chapters. So this is chapter 3. It's called Ordinary Meets Bullies in the Borderland. Not far past the sign, Ordinary's path sloped downward. Ahead, he saw the wide waters and the bridge to the unknown. Between him and the bridge lay the borderland, an open stretch of flat ground. Ordinary was surprised to see standing in the middle of the borderland a few nobodies from Familiar. One of the nobodies who looked more familiar than most was hurrying towards him. It was his mother. She rushed up and threw her arms around Ordinary. "Oh, Ordy," she cried, "my baby, thank goodness we got here in time." Right? "But how did you get here so fast?" he asked. "When you're not really leaving Familiar," she said, "you don't have to break through all that dreadful discomfort." "But why are you here?" "You mustn't go on," she said. "I was so alarmed when I heard you were leaving Familiar. I know you told us that you were, but I never thought you would. Honestly, what were you thinking? It's not safe. You could get hurt. You could even die." "But it's my big dream, Mother," said Ordinary. "It's a wonderful dream, and I want to pursue it." He tried to reassure his mother. He told her that as big dreams go, his was only a little life-threatening, but this seemed to alarm Mother more than ever. And as they walked across the borderland, Ordinary spotted his uncle and best friend. Ordinary's uncle strode up first. "So, you've decided to become a dreamer," he said accusingly. "Do you realize that you're going completely against every tradition in this family? Why should you become a somebody when the rest of us have always been happy being nobodies?" Before Ordinary could reply, Best Friend stepped in. "I was worried before, Ordinary," he said gravely, "but the more I thought about it, the more convinced I am that you can't succeed at this. I can't stand by and watch you go down in defeat." Ordinary was speechless and bewildered. He heard a rumor about border bullies, but he had supposed that if it were true, bullies would be nobodies he didn't know. He never imagined they'd be some of the nobodies who knew him best. Now his mother, uncle, and best friend all stood silently before him, blocking his view of the bridge to his big dream. How would he ever get past them? Should he even try? He needed time to think. He asked his bullies to wait for him. They walked along down to the water's edge where he sat on a large rock. He, looking out over the wide waters, Ordinary thought and thought. He thought until he began to think that maybe his bullies were right. Maybe he was wrong to pursue his dream. Then Ordinary heard a voice call his name. When he turned to see who it was, he recognized a somebody. It was Champion, an old friend from Familiar who used to be a nobody. "Champion," exclaimed Ordinary, "what are you doing here?" Champion sat down on the rock beside him. "When I heard you had become a dreamer, I just had to come," he said. "I knew you'd need help." "Thanks," said Ordinary with a heavy sigh, "but did you see all my bullies?" "I saw them," said the champion. "They're bullies, all right, but think of me as your border buster. I want to help you break through their opposition." Then Champion helped Ordinary understand what was happening. "Your mother, uncle, and best friend are only doing what's natural," he said. "When you left your comfort zone, you really shook up theirs. Each of them has something to lose if you go forward. Makes sense, said Ordinary, but what do I do now? How do I get all my bullies on my side? Well, you might not be able to. Wisdom is the key. Try to understand what's motivating them. Look for the merit of their concerns. But most border bullies have concerns that can help you clarify your plans. That's how a dreamer turns opposition into opportunity. When Champion stood to leave, he said, "Hold fast to your dream, Ordinary. You're going to be a somebody someday, and I just know it." Then he shook Ordinary's hand and jumped down from the rock. "Remember," he said, "when bullies try to block your way, what matters most is who you choose to please." Ordinary thought about Champion's parting words. He decided it was time to talk to the bullies again. As the sun began to set, he walked back and forth along the water's edge, talking to them. He told them more about his dream. He learned from their concerns. Then he told them that he had decided to pursue his dream into the unknown. By sundown, Ordinary was ready to cross the border. As Mother handed him his suitcase, he saw tears in her eyes. "I've changed my mind. I want you to pursue your dream," she said, "and your father and I will be proud of you. I think he wishes he had taken the same journey that you have years ago." Then she hugged him goodbye, and Ordinary shook hands with Best Friend and his uncle, who still did not look pleased. While the three watched, he walked down toward the bridge over the wide waters. In the gathering dusk, Ordinary had failed to notice that another nobody was standing on the bridge. But this nobody was not just any nobody. He was the landlord of Familiar. He was the one who decided what was right for nobodies. He owned every inch of the land. He even owned the bridge. "I'm denying you access to my bridge," he said. "But why?" asked Ordinary. "Because I need every nobody to stay in Familiar at their usual job," said the landlord. "I won't lose any more nobodies to the silly notion of dreams, right? I will not let you go." Huh. Ordinary tried hard not to panic. Wisdom told him that an antagonist like the Lord was the worst kind of bully. He had a lot to lose, and he didn't care about Ordinary. What should he do now? What could he do? Then Ordinary remembered Champion's parting words, and that's when he decided to swim. He knew he might not make it. The wide waters were very wide, and he wasn't a very strong swimmer. But he had to try. While his buddies looked on, Ordinary walked down to the wide waters. He was about to step in when something caught his eye. A small boat was moored nearby. When he got closer, Ordinary saw a note on the seat of the boat. It's like a little Dr. Seuss thing. He picked it up and read, "Ordinary, if you found this boat, I know you've chosen to please the dream giver. Enjoy a dry crossing. Your dream is waiting for you in the land of promise. I promise, Champion." Ordinary untied the boat, stowed his suitcase in front of the boat, and shoved off. As he rowed out into the wide waters, Ordinary watched his border bullies grow smaller and smaller. When he was sure that he had finally really left Familiar, he waved his last goodbye to the nobodies on the shore. But by then, it was too dark to tell if they waved back. All right, so that's chapter 3. I thought it was interesting. He talks about, he had family opposition and he had friend opposition. And so the minute that he began to break out of the ordinary, when he began to move, and we've talked a lot about on our podcast about, what this process looks like, that God is moving in the realm of the unfamiliar. And so everything about this era is literally unfamiliar. We've been prepared for this landscape, not so much because we've done it all right and that our path has been perfect and that we haven't had lots of fires and explosions along the way to take us out, but we're prepared because our consistent response has been yes to the Lord. And even if that yes was as simple as I'm still standing and I'm not going anywhere, even if the yes was one that you didn't even feel like you had, even if it was something you weren't even sure was there, but nonetheless, our we fell in love with Jesus and we learned how to dig deep in the places that were really hard and dry and just wasteland places and places where we were walking through fires, and we learned to trust that God was good. And part of it, even in the story, is that the dream giver and the dreamer are forming this relationship where the dreamer is falling in love with the dream giver. And so the primary theme that runs through the whole thing, and it's the same theme that runs through the theme of our own life, is this trust factor. Do you trust me? Do you trust me when this happens and when this happens? This particular chapter deals with the bullies that happen to be, family opposition. Um, it's an interesting thought that at the same time, when Jesus is doing a lot of things to bring great restoration to families and prodigals coming home and restoring the family, if we broaden this a little bit in terms of family, not necessarily meaning your families of origin, but just in general, those of the people that you would consider family along the way, it puts things in context when Jesus says that you're going to leave mothers and brothers and sisters for my sake, and if you do, when you leave those things behind, and many of us have already done a lot of that in terms of we've already had places. In fact, it's been part of our history. You know, I don't know anybody, I don't know very many people, let's say it this way, who hasn't had estranged relationships, prodigal kids, stuff that has gone badly in families as they've basically followed and pursued what God's put in their heart. That's been part of the territory, that part of the disappointments and part of the things that have been so heartbreaking are the things that have happened in families. And so, in many ways, we've already seen and lived out a big piece of what Jesus talks about. A lot of people, when they got saved, it became opposition. You know, um, People that understand you, people that understand. And I think the divide now is less about salvation as much as it is the remnant, the manifest sons and daughters that God's raising up are going to get weirder and weirder. They're going to carry glory and be manifestors of glory. And the divide between them and what has been traditional church around them is going to grow further and further because we're leaving the land of everything being rational and familiar, and we're going into and embracing this land where we become untethered to everything that has ever held us that's been familiar. And so part of that in all of the disorientation and all of the lawlessness, the thing that Jesus has been getting out of this with the remnant is a great resolve in us to want to do everything to jump into. We want to be kingdom people in this era. We're about the kingdom. It's not about us. We've already lost a lot of reputation. We've already paid a huge price in terms of our own willingness to surrender. We've surrendered at every juncture, however messy that surrender has been. We've yielded, and in the process of everything being untethered from everything that's been familiar to us, we became a people and are becoming a people, present continuous, who are freer to walk in an untethered reality in our future. We're willing to walk in places we haven't walked before. We're willing to live unscripted lives, and we're willing to have Jesus change the plan, to alter the plan, to evolve the plan, to do things in the plan that, you know, old dreams that get refined and new dreams that emerge, or finding ourselves pregnant with multiple things. And usually, particularly in this context, in this era, there are things that we thought we would never do. So the qualification for the era isn't knowing anything, because if that were the case, we're all done. We're peace out. We're done. The reason you can walk in something you've never done before, and the reason that you're willing to, embrace something that you feel like God is saying that doesn't look like anything that you've ever done before. You've been prepared in this arena and this arena and this arena, and then God says launch out over here, is simply because you don't want anything else but what God's on. So we got that part settled, right? There's no going backwards. There's no religious camp that we want to jump back into. And we're desperate to do and to see the kingdom established. We're kingdom people. That's one of the things he's woven inside of us. I often tell the Lord, if you wanted me to be any different, if you wanted me to be satisfied with familiar and humdrum, then you created the wrong person. If you wanted me to not want to lead revival and launch a generation around the globe, then you created the wrong person. So he's the one that formed the dream, but there's a lot of things that come into the process. And I think that's what the dream giver kind of gives language to along the way. What happens when the dream is conceived, and what does it look like as we walk it out? And our Hammer School, the prophets, we've talked a lot about the dream, and we've realized that part of the process that people are in right now is that they're not sure what it is and they can't fully articulate it. They know that there's a core place of frustration inside of them and something they want to see manifest on the earth, something that's heavenly manifest here. And I would say that in that frustration lies part of the call. It's the thing that you want to see change, that you know that only the kingdom can change. And so as you move into that, when you look at what's happening in just this chapter 3, he makes the statement, champion shows up, which I thought was awesome. He's got the border, people there, family and whatnot. And he makes a good point. Here was champion's point. To the degree that you can assimilate wisdom from your opposition, take it. In other words, if your opposition and the people that come out, part of the way that God refines the dream is that he brings in places of opposition that move us into a place of seeking wisdom and obtaining wisdom in the middle of the dream. If you're the people who oppose you and bring up things and show you things that are all the things that could go wrong with it, and all the things that could fail, and all the things that are wrong, if in entertaining that there's something of wisdom to be gained, he's saying what champion says is take the wisdom and run. Having said that, there is still that place where even as you've taken in all the many concerns, right, and you're trying to be wise about your endeavor and the steps you're taking, there still comes a place where you might have to do just kind of push some people out of the way. I mean, honestly. And that's the hard part, and it's okay. I think it was very gracious what Champion did for Ordinary. He was prepared as the bullies were blocking the bridge to go over, and there's the mass of water. It's like, well, I might have to swim. He was prepared. And I think, and then even in that, and this is where I feel like the Lord has been doing some pretty interesting things, because he knows our heart and he knows what you're prepared to lay down for the dream. There are places even now that the Lord is kind of coming into the picture, these things that are happening in this 11th hour, the hour of while you're sleeping, the things that are happening in the unseen real, the background stuff, the things that he's been preparing that are suddenlies to us, right? Because suddenly there's a boat there, right? But not suddenlies to him. The thing that's a perspective piece for me is that from the very conception of time and that we were conceived in him before the foundation of the earth, everything that has to do with our destiny was already part of him and part of us because we were with him before the foundations of the earth. So the fact that that's true means if we were conceived in him and we were with him before the foundations of the earth, and our union is what places us in the middle with him now, why would he not fulfill the promise and the dream and fulfill the destiny and propel you and me into it if it was part of the very foundation of all things in the beginning with him? It was already a reality before it was a reality in your birth, right? That's what Psalm 139 tells us. All these things have been written in the book of life before you were even born. So what we see in that, and I think most of us as dreamers and as pioneers, what we do see is we do see the hand of the Lord in every place, which is oftentimes easier to see in retrospect than just moving forward or in the moment. So I thought it was interesting that at that place, and this is the part I feel like the Lord's doing some things. In the places that you've already given your yielded yes, He's already made a way for you. And there are some things that you're not going to have to do. It's called grace on steroids. The boat to cross rather than to swim was an example of that kind of grace. It's all really about the internal and interior landscape of our heart. That's the part that really becomes the shaping force. It's what he's doing in this union with us and rearranging the interior landscape of our heart in order to align us with what he's doing and what he's been about doing. The reason I can say with confidence that you can't screw this up is because he's already done such a work in the interior landscape to prepare you for this landscape. Even if you don't know it, perceive it, or can even label all of it, it doesn't mean it's not true. And so, in many ways, that's why I can say a lot. He's into it more than we are. And he's prepared some things for you already in anticipation of the yielded yes that's already in your heart. And that's where the union, I used to, I still do. I struggle with the whole thing of the desires of my heart. But it is this interior landscape that God is working on that actually begins to reveal the true desires of my heart. And the things that are periphery or the things that we feel locked into or that I'm familiar with. It's almost as if you have to be untethered from everything familiar in order to find what the real desire of your heart is. Because everything that we are tethered to, whether it's a lie, whether it's unbelief, whether it's religion, whether it's our own shame, everything that we are tethered to becomes an obstacle to the fulfillment and the complete download of what heaven is doing inside of me. So hence he's been eagerly, removing some of those blocks. And even that process isn't one that I can just do. I remind Jesus a lot that this is his responsibility. You got to create in me what you want inside of me in order to align with you so that the blueprint of heaven is realized through me and released through me on the planet, that which you have assigned us to do, that which you have given to me. And so, even as I sleep, I believe that Jesus is untethering me from every mindset, every block, everything that would be in the way of the truth of what he has and the reality of the dream that is already inside of me being fully uncovered, fully awakened, and fully manifest. So he's doing the work. That's the double, triple grace on steroids part of this whole thing. Even the landscape of my heart and the things that I can't do, you come and do so that I can actually come into agreement with you and do the thing that was in both of us together before all of time. Is that not grace on steroids, like quadrupled, to the fourth power? I don't do math. And so the question that he asked him and the thing that the champion puts before him, and I'll wrap with this for this particular chapter, is every time that we come to the place of the obstacle, and I think you can always anticipate that there are going to be bullies along the way. And some of them are going to be some of the closest people to you that just don't get you. Wisdom and grace says that in every place that I can preserve relationship and walk with people hand in hand in this, we will do. And in the places where we can't, I can graciously say that I still need to do this and I love you and I'm not rejecting you, but I still need to do this and I need to go forward. Their response to what you do is their response. Whether it's because it triggers jealousy, whether it's because it triggers contempt, whether it can, whatever it is, it's not about you. And those are the places where Jesus says, if you want to lose, if you want to gain your life, you have to lose it. There is a constant losing my life through the course of the journey that is essential in gaining the very thing that he wants to give me. So the sacrifices are often the things that we have to let go of or come out of relationship with, or separate from, or move in a direction from, or even endure persecution in places in order to do the thing that's in us. It's never going to be popular. It's never going to be something. And trust me, the traditional church, I'm not talking about manifest sons and daughters of God, the remnant who walk in crazy glory, manifesting the kingdom everywhere they go, radically in tune with the Holy Spirit, radically connected to their union. The more we go, the crazier we're going to look. And at the end of the day, having exercised the wisdom of champion and taken into myself the counsel of the voices I hear, I will still need to follow the voice of the Father inside of me and graciously move forward, even in places of being greatly misunderstood. And that is going to be part of this landscape, present continuous. So the only thing that sets our course in this is knowing the voice of the one that's already inside of us and obeying that voice, because the fruit and the reward of that obedience will so far outweigh everything else that we have to endure. And it is the fruit of that obedience that, as we follow him, I believe, that sows into the kingdom, into the spirit, all the things that need to happen to bring reconciliation in places where it still is yet to be been wrought or been fleshed out. In other words, say it this way: seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you. I might not be able in the moment to deal with the family tension because of what I'm doing to follow Jesus. I may not in the moment have, there are seasons in my wife and I's life where we have been more estranged than others, and from various people and family, etc. The decision that you make in the moment, and having exercised the wisdom that you know, and still are yet propelled forward into a direction that people don't get or that causes whatever. It is the obedience in those places that actually opens up the kind of favor that will come around and be part of this equation. You sow obedience to the voice of Jesus, and you will reap a harvest. It might not be the harvest that you see today, but it will be a harvest. He said, if you leave these things and you pursue and give up your homes and your relationships and whatever you do to follow me, he said, you're going to get it all in this life and eternal life to come. It may not look like everything tit for tat that you thought you should get in this life. But I can say this, in a season of great acceleration and great fulfillment, it will come back around as a reward and favor and reconciliation in places you could have never imagined. Because essentially, what we do with our obedience is we give him the room to do what he has to do. And if we can do that in the middle without having to understand everything, and we still walk in that place, listening to the voice and do what he does, what we sow in the spirit and in the kingdom has a great return and reward on it. And it will come back to you exceedingly beyond all that you could think or imagine. The pathway to the exceedingly beyond what you can imagine, which is great fulfillment, is wrought through the obedience of hearing the voice and responding to his voice as you go. And as you lose your life in that way, you will gain it 100-fold in this life and eternal life to go. So I'll leave it with that. Bless you guys. If you find this to be helpful, like it and then share it. All right, let's keep the conversation going.